Hello and welcome to Design Dispatches, where every week I talk to a distinguished member of the design community about their cultural landscape and how they got to where they are now. And today I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Anya Hindmarch, the fashion designer and fashion accessories designer, who in a visionary and sustainable way has helped rethink our relationship to the bag and the bag's relationship to the planet, among other things. She began a business in 1987, since when it's gone global. She's been honoured both nationally and internationally. She was made a CPE in 2017 and a Greenpeace ambassador in 2019. Anya, it's good to see you. What's your cultural landscape like at the moment? What have you been reading, for example?
Good question. It's really nice to see you two, albeit on a screen. I haven't had a lot of time for reading. That's the frustrating thing. I'm actually part of a new sort of Zoom book club, and every Monday I get to the book club and I've read 25% of the book. But the book that I'm enjoying, I'm trying to just take this time to read things that I am, not only for pleasure, but just to learn. A book I'm enjoying at the moment is actually called Cradle to Cradle, which is just talking about the sort of the supply chain of products and how we can, be more circular. It's just a really interesting take, actually. So that's what I'm enjoying reading, and then I'm trying to fit in these other books in between and failing badly, frankly.
I remember when that book was published 15, 20 years ago, and it was written by an architect and a chemist.
Yeah.
That collaborative idea is interesting, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, actually, just as just taking you back to the basics. And it's not rocket science, really. It's just looking at the longevity of things, the use of the longevity, how we source things. I mean, it's just about common sense. That's the bit that actually I think we've all lost. And strangely, I think this period now feels like, aside from, you can't find any silver linings because it's horrific for so many, but it feels like there is this moment to reset, this moment to breathe, actually, and so much of this book is really fascinating to me because it's all of that. So that's my current read, and a lot of half-finished novels.
I'm interested in people's motivations and inspirations. I mean, that predated your "This is not a plastic bag" campaign and the production of that iconic tote bag. But it seems like in a career like yours, begun in the late 1980s, it almost seems predetermined. But when did you actually know that you wanted to be a designer and you could be a designer? It was a feasible career for you.
I think being a designer is something, it's part of your DNA, honestly. I started making things. That's the thing that was interesting to me when I was about 5. I remember sort of being in my playroom and making things out of paper, things like little mini wallets and things that would hold things and organize things. And it's just what I've always done. We've always sort of found creative ways to play with things and make things. So it was sort of from the beginning. I think I had a moment when my mother gave me one of her old handbags when I was 16. And I remember two things. I remember how it made me feel, that incredible sort of power of something beautiful, and how it actually is sort of makes you feel sort of, it's quite empowering, and it's so pleasurable. And for me, the sense of appreciation of the craftsmanship, which is always my starting point. I think that the craftsmen are the absolute heroes of design, because you can have a great idea, but how it's made is what makes it beautiful or not. So that's that moment at 16 was a moment. It sort of really, it just was. I remember it very clearly, actually. As I remember, by the way, going to the Design Museum, which was the Commonwealth Institute, when I was about 15, and the effect that building had on me, strangely. I remember absolutely clearly walking into that space and being affected by that building. So they're very sort of big moments, those things.
Interesting, and full of strange objects in amazing cases and vignettes and
dusty coffee beans was my big take up, but it wasn't about that what you were seeing. It was this cathedral-like space that was it was quite sort of altering, actually. It was really, really special. So that's a big memory as well.
Architecture often is seen to have both a visceral and an emotional impact on us. Does design have that kind of parallel effect for you? I mean, your description of the handbag when you were 16, I could see you I could almost imagine you feeling it, smelling it, sort of reveling in it.
100%. I mean, it changes my mood, and I think it changes how you feel. It can often, I think the reason, and I'm not a very frilly fashion person at all, but what I'm interested in fashion is how it changes your sense of self, and it shows who you are. It's sort of quite tribal, and it's quite confidence boosting, actually. And I think architecture, more than anything, for me, more than fashion, I mean, you know, the reason churches are those incredible buildings is because it actually has it changes how you feel. So for me, it's my you know, my meat and wine. You know, it's absolutely imperative to my mood and my sense of self in a way, actually. So, and I think that's just, it's sort of slightly part of who you are. And we were discussing it last night with the kids, you know, what job would you be really bad at? And there's so many, you know, I would be a terrible accountant, for example. You know, there's some, you know, good, everyone's different. For me, I need that feeling of appreciation of craft and space and design. I would be lost without it, actually.
What about the spaces in which you create? I mean, you're at home now in lockdown. How similar to the spaces that you normally work and create in is that? And what impacts it having on your process?
Well, very different. I mean, I work in an old, a really rather beautiful old stable, which is one huge and very high-ceilinged room where they kept all the dray horses. It was a sort of stable of an old brewery. So it's a rather beautiful room, actually, and again, gives me that sense. It's very, very white. It's very light. And it's a nice space to work in. At home, I'm in a very sort of rather typical Georgian house on many, many floors, which equally architecture is very beautiful, actually. And in fact, having time at home I mean, I'm never at home. When are we ever at home? We're so damn busy. So having time to kind of actually enjoy the proportion of the windows and, you know, all the little things that are, you know, quite special to London, actually, is really, really lovely. So it's a different space, but it has an architectural sense of self. It's, you know, it's interesting. I think you can design anywhere, though. I mean, I sometimes have my best ideas in the shower, on an aeroplane. For me, it's about an empty head more than a space, actually, for design. And I think design also can be, you know, it's a job ultimately. And I find that, you know, you just have to apply your mind to it, empty your mind out and just let it sort of flow. So it's as much about a glass of wine, actually, as it is a location.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking our way through this isolation.
Given your renowned love of craftsmanship, when you have an idea in the shower, on a plane, or in your studio, how close is the idea to that which can be realised in the end by good craftsmanship?
Well, from kind of conception through to birth is a very muddly journey, and it's really important, I think, to recognise that as something that is kind of imperative. So, you know, often I'll start with a really clear idea, and it's that classic curve they talk about of, you know, I love it, it's amazing, I like it, I'm not sure, I'm having doubts, I hate it, and then you go, I hate myself. And then it's like, actually, it's all right. In fact, I love it. It's okay. And you kind of go, and when you're in that dip for design, which every designer goes through, and it's frankly, it's a tough place to be, you have to remember that it's what you do. And it's part of that sort of, that, you know, that, I don't know, introspection, that, you know, really forcing yourself to push through those kind of blocks that actually often makes you kind of come up with something that's special, that you don't just bang it out. You have to kind of go, it's a painful process, I think, most of the time. So often what I start with is entirely different from what we end up with. Sometimes it's completely clear. There's no path. I think if there were an easy path to extrapolate, it would be an easier, I guess more people would do it. I mean, it's quite hard at times. It hurts design sometimes.
Sure. And obviously process is a collaborative one, and it's to do with your physical experience of material and what can be done with them, and working with the craftspeople who make the materials. But in lockdown, are you having weird and wonderful or lateral ideas, or is it quite reinforcing of the design that you've done in the past, and there's a momentum and a logic to its connectedness with what you've done in the past?
Well, I mean, two things. The first is my team and I have worked together for years, so we know, I mean, we literally know each other so well, so that's helped. We were actually, we worked really hard. We could sort of see lockdown coming. So we were actually at a stage in our calendar, luckily, where we could finish the collection before we split. So in fact, we segregated physically the design team, because we did at that stage need to be together, because you need to hold and look and see, and, you know, there's bits of engineering and you need to touch. So we worked right to the last minute, and just literally the team, and we sealed everyone off. We had a kind of what we called the pass between the rest of the kind of office and so on. And we kind of got it to the point where we could all then split, and we then carried on doing more of the kind of specking, the sort of drawing up. And then, so we've been able to, we have what we call the wall, which is this, huge wall with all the collection on it, which we often move around and look at in summer, and we printed that off, so we've all have a version of the wall at home. And actually, so that the moment in the calendar was actually quite an opportune one. So that's good, but I'm finding that I always find I have my best ideas when I'm just not in that crazy world of everything else we have to do. So that's why I find when I travel or I'm on a plane, I have good ideas, because you just have fresh ideas, you have a bit of space to think and to, you know, to I don't know, just to dream afresh, really. So I think we've been pretty productive, actually. There will be certain things within the calendar that will be tricky not being together, for sure, but we know each other well enough to push on. So I think it's okay, and I think you should really take advantage. And one of the things we're really doing, actually, which is more on the business side, but it's still a creative take, is I don't think we should come out of this lockdown, talking about my industry, as we went into it. I mean, the fashion industry, in my opinion, is desperately old-fashioned. I think it was frankly unsustainable and spiraling sort of out of control. So one of the things we're working on, which is really exciting, we've reset our entire calendar. So, I mean, you know, discount periods used to be in August and in January. And then it all sort of morphed into like May and November. And we've just actually literally put them back and rearranged our entire critical path to actually deliver product at the right time, weather appropriate, not discounting the order, just actually really re-engineering how we produce stuff. So that's been a lovely moment and a silver lining, actually, to take stock. And we're actually now today speaking to our partners all around the world. You know, I've got Hong Kong in an hour, and I was in New York this morning, just saying, we want to do this, will you back us? And everyone's actually getting together and going, you know, we have to reset. So there's lots of good stuff I think you can do. And I think that actually it was all a bit, I mean, we've just done this huge, as you know, this big environmental project, and that, which was two more years, I haven't done it back in 2007, but 2 more years recently of developing that, which is both engineering in many ways and complex, and learning a lot about recycling and materiality and circularity and you know, what matters, and we're all learning together on this. But actually it was kind of disgusting the way we're behaving in fashion. Too much stuff, not appreciated, not circular, too much landfill, too much waste. It needs a proper rethink. So this is, you know, we would be silly not to use it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, both those projects, the 2007, This Is Not a Plastic Bag, and then in 2019, that wonderful venture where you filled your gallery, or the shop rather, turned it into a gallery in London with plastic, and then produced this material that could produce, this is a plastic bag, out of, I think, 32 half-litre bottles, plastic bottles, recycled. Both of them were sort of pioneering, and they were campaigning, and they certainly struck a public chord, and they had lots of coverage in the media. Do you think they made a difference? I mean, first in 2007, and then the signs were that was starting to make a difference.
Well, they did, actually, because I mean, 2007 was pretty early onto this subject, and I mean, I think the British Retail Consortium, and I get my numbers wrong now because I've had this break, but I think that the consumption of plastic bags pre the project in 2007 was something like 9 billion, and it went down to, I think, 6, and don't quote me on those numbers, but it had a significant impact. So, you know, it was baptism by fire and a complicated project to do, but it did make a difference. However, when we relaunched it again in 2020, actually just this February, so very recently, the words that kind of kept going around my head from the last project were, when you throw something away, there is no away. And the fact is, we have not solved this issue. And I wanted just to fill the stores with, I mean, we sourced, I think it was 90,000 used plastic PET bottles, and closed all the stores and filled them, which was kind of disgusting. And the office sourced them. We sourced them, washed them, and filled them, because actually there's nothing like seeing what you throw away. I mean, I visited now a lot of recycling centres and landfill sites, and when you actually see it, you just would stop if you saw it. You wouldn't carry on. If you had to bury what you threw away in your own garden, you would just stop buying it. You would stop taking it. So, sorry, I'm sounding a bit campaigny now, but anyway, it was a fascinating project. But I think the thing about filling the store with bottles, it was also a kind of rather gallery-esque and rather beautiful, artful installation in a way. So it kind of resonated in a nice way and a bit of a shocking way as well.
I suppose my follow-up question, when I was setting you up to answer, was, do you believe that this current crisis, where we've seen a positive impact on the environment, but do you think there's genuine reasons for hope that we might reconfigure our relationship with the planet? Or do you think the Western economies and the late free market capitalist system is going to be so hammered that we'll return to business as normal with a vengeance to try and rescue the economy?
Mm. Well, I mean, this is going to be the absolute, this is going to be the tension point, because clearly you've got a lot of businesses, the issues of the planet and the changes we need to make in order to make a difference often slip down the priority list when everyone's just fighting for jobs and lives, and slightly understandably. What's fascinating to me, though, is look what we've achieved for this corona situation. Look what we've decided to do and what we've sacrificed. In terms of businesses and livelihood, and I mean, so much, seeing our friends, our family. I mean, it's an enormous sacrifice. Would we do that for the planet? The planet actually is considerably more serious a threat to all of us, and yet just because it's further away, we're not prepared to take those steps in a way. So it's a kind of fascinating thing that could we for a period every year? I mean, not that we want to stop business, obviously, because that supports people and livelihoods, but is there a way we can have a breather? Could we take a pause once a year where everyone collectively gets together and just has this time? Because I think apart from the hideous health aspects and hideous job losses and effect on the economy and the fact we're going to be paying for it forever, but can we just take time to actually pause and just think about the effect on the planet and see what we're capable of? I think that's really interesting, but we need to kind of recover first, and this has had a very horribly significant impact on people. So, it's going to take a bit of time, I guess.
I think design has a major role to play in our future, clearly, along with science. Just backpedaling a bit, who were the designers that you admired most when you were younger, or who had the biggest impact on you?
Gosh, so many. I mean, one, fun enough, for me as a constant has been Terence Conran, actually. Who we both know really well. But I was just thinking about it last week and thinking about, of all the stores, for me, in a way, as a child growing up, stores become like galleries, don't they? In a way, they're places you can go and visit and you can actively buy things and so on. And so, whether it was Habitat or Conran Shop, and then indeed the museum, I think I always went into those environments and felt happier, altered, often, desperate to recreate it at home. So inspired, actually. And it was quite it was quite easy to feel that you could connect to that. You could also, it wasn't so sort of alien or remote, or it felt that you could buy into it and you could take a bit of it and actually change things in your own life. So Terence has been a constant source of inspiration, and deserves big shout out for that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he changed certainly the way that the British saw design, but obviously had international resonance in that regard too. Absolutely. Before I ask you for some advice for young designers in the way that Terence consciously and subconsciously may have given to you, we ask our guests if they have an object that they'd like to bring and share with us, to talk about it, personal associations, or its physicality, or its materialism or materiality. Do you have something?
Not with me, sorry, I didn't get them. I'm so sorry. Well, actually, you know what?
Well, there we go then.
What I do have next to me is a big biro, actually. It's plastic, so that's not so great. However, what I was going to say is I'm sort of started, you're at home, so you're using all the kids, school pens. And I've had real pleasure from the big multicolored pen that you push down. Do you know the one I mean? It has four colors you push down. And it's sort of on my desk, and I started using it. It's a thing of real engineering sort of elegance, actually. And it's a rather beautiful thing. I've known it all my life. So actually something as simple as a Bic Biro, or indeed the Bic multicolour pen, I don't know what it's called, but it's given me a lot of pleasure over the last week as I'm highlighting and writing notes. So yes, the simple things that work well and last actually really appeal to me.
I love the fact that Anya Hindmarch, pioneer against overuse of plastic.
All right, okay, forgive me.
No, you're not busted. It's good. That was honest. Also, funny enough, it's something I don't know about you, but I have huge numbers of pens. You just acquire them, and actually, what I'm doing is I'm using them up. So I'm trying to, trying to work through them all rather than.
No, I totally agree. Waste not want. But I think there's also a lovely. I haven't got it here, but there's a lovely brass pencil I have, a rotating pencil, which is it by Kaweco? It's a German brand. I don't know how you pronounce it. Which is something that gives me real pleasure, not only because it has a sharpener in the end of the pen. It's kind of sort of quite a chubby brass rotating pencil. And that's something that gives me a lot of pleasure as well. So yes, I'm using up, thank you for saving me. I'm using up the plastic, and I will then go back to my my lovely brass pencil.
And just one other thing. We also ask if when this is ended and you can go somewhere to see or experience a building, we deliberately ask for a building, not a place, because obviously most of us would probably want to just jump into the ocean or go to a beach or rekindle some wonderful place that we've been to or place that we've always yearned to go to. But what building would you like to visit post-lockdown at some stage? What do you yearn to see again?
Well, there's so many. I mean, I just love history, so there's so many. And there's lovely Wellington Arch in Hyde Park Corner. We did a project where we filled it with a chubby heart, and we've actually recoloured them all in blue, sort of celebrating the NHS. So that's a special building to me. But the place that I was about to go to, which I'm annoyed that I haven't got to yet and had to cancel the trip, is actually my very dear friend Amanda Levitt's MAT, the Lisbon Amazing Museum. She's done of art, architecture and technology. So I want to go and see those porcelain tiles. I remember Amanda showing them to me in her studio, and it just seems amazing that porcelain is so hard wearing when you think of it as something that's so sort of fragile. So I'm very desperate to go and see that for real. So that's where I'll be heading.
And finally, what advice would you give to either a younger version of yourself or to a young designer who is facing the situation now in lockdown and the consequences of, or the possibilities of what will happen after?
Well, I think you can create anywhere. And often I find that when I have the tightest straitjacket, I do my best work, whether that's on a budget or whether that's in terms of materials. I mean, you can make anything. When I first started designing aged 18, I made all my handbags from paper. And effectively, it was the beginnings of a pattern. So I just don't believe it's limiting. And in fact, if anything, I think that the limitations actually make you more creative. So I think no excuses, just stay creative and get going, really.
Anya, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure
Really nice
and a revelation.
Bye.